AITA for reminding my wife about the prenup after she kicked me out and asked for a divorce. I'm 37. I've reviewed all this content, and while the support means a lot, it's all over. We're going to keep growing this channel, as she believes so much in herself. I'm going to back up a bit. Let's start from the beginning. I run a plumbing business. I've done it since I was 21. I started it with a friend from tech school, and now I have my own crew. We do good work. We always have a backlog, and most weeks, I'm out of the house before dawn. I'm not rich, but I have savings, paid-off tools, a reliable truck, and zero debt. I'm proud of that. I met Daniela, a 34-year-old woman, 6 years ago. She worked in finance, the spreadsheet and presentation kind, not the weird get-rich-quick internet stuff. We met at a charity event downtown. I got called in to fix a broken water heater at the venue, and she was there as a donor or something. She complimented me on how I talked to the volunteers and made fun of my cargo pants. I told her she talked like she ran a hedge fund, and she laughed like it was the first genuine laugh she'd had all week. We clicked. I liked how driven she was. She liked that I wasn't trying to impress her with anything fake. It all just flowed. We started dating and moved in together within a year. We picked out furniture together. We argued about what to name the Wi-Fi, normal couple things. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a real partnership. My parents weren't thrilled with her. They were polite, but they didn't connect with her energy. My mom once told me, she sees everything as temporary, even you. At the time, I thought it was a harsh take. I figured they just didn't understand her ambition. Daniela was always thinking about the next step, the next promotion, the next investment, the next 5-year plan. I just thought that was how she was wired. A couple of years later, we started talking about marriage. It wasn't a big proposal. We were on the couch watching reruns, and she said she was ready. So was I. We wanted something simple. We planned a small wedding. A few weeks before the wedding, she brought up a prenuptial agreement. I was a little surprised. We didn't have a huge wealth disparity. She had her savings. I had mine. I didn't see the point, but she said it was to keep everything clear just in case. It felt weird at first, planning for failure before we even started, but she wasn't pushy about it. She said it gave her peace of mind, and honestly, I figured it wouldn't matter if we were both in it for the long haul. So we signed it. Her lawyer drafted it, mine reviewed it. We didn't argue over any clauses. It basically said that whatever we brought into the marriage was our own, but everything we earned during the marriage, property, bonuses, new accounts, would be shared. There was a section about performance income. I remember asking her about that part, too. She just shrugged and said, "It's standard. I don't expect to get anything that big anyway." And life went on. The first few years of marriage were solid. We bought a house, not a mansion, just a 2-story near the lake with a decent yard. She put more toward the down payment, but I handled everything monthly. Utilities, mortgage, repairs, everything. I fixed the plumbing myself, of course. We even rebuilt the deck one summer. It was a good home. Her career started to seriously take off around year 3. She was promoted to a senior position at her firm. She started working crazy hours, flying to meetings, and doing a lot of things I didn't fully understand. I supported her through all of it. It didn't bother me. She was killing it, and I was proud. Then, one day she walks in the door, drops her bag, and says calmly, like she's talking about a rescheduled meeting, "I got the bonus." I was on the couch, looking for something to watch while dinner was in the oven. I looked up and asked, "The year-end bonus?" She nodded, dropped her keys in the bowl like it was nothing, and said, $10 million. I was in shock. 10. She repeated it word for word, like she was reading a financial report. $10 million. The highest performance bonus in the company's history. They closed some deal in Argentina and enhanced the executive packages. I kept waiting for her to smile, to say it was a joke or something, but no. She just stood there with her arms crossed. A neutral expression. No high five, no can you believe it? Just a weird energy, like she was checking an item off a to-do list. I said, "That's huge. That's life-changing. What do we do now? As in, what's the plan?" She paused, looked away, and said, "I need to think." That was it. No talk of travel, no couple decisions, just, "I need to think," as if she had to decide if I even fit into her next phase. That's when it stopped feeling like a win and started feeling like a warning. I thought, think about what? Everything. As if she suddenly saw me and the look wasn't warm. It was the kind of look you give someone who's asking questions you don't feel like answering. She said, "This is a lot." I didn't expect it to happen this fast. I need to process everything, figure out where I stand. No plans, no celebration, no shared dreams. She shut down. She started locking her phone more, taking calls outside, sleeping less, talking less. She barely smiled. I asked if we were okay, and she said, "Yeah, I just need some time." That little bit of time ended 2 weeks later when she handed me divorce papers over breakfast. I just stared at them for a while. For thick pages stapled together like a school assignment. My name at the top, in bold, like I was being notified that my subscription had ended. It didn't even feel personal, just cold ink and legal formatting. Daniela was sitting across the table from me, silent, unmoving. No sadness, no smugness, just still, as if she had already moved out in her head and was now just waiting for me to catch up. I kept scanning the pages, but nothing was sinking in. My eyes were moving, but I wasn't comprehending anything. The only thing I managed to say after what felt like an eternity was, "So that's it." She didn't react, just nodded and said, "Yes, that's it." I asked again, looking her in the eyes this time. "You're handing me divorce papers like it's a permission slip for school?" She looked down for a second, then back at me. I didn't know how else to do it. "How about literally any other way?" I said. "I don't know. A conversation, a warning, a hey, I think we're in trouble, something." "I didn't want to fight," she said. "I didn't think it was worth it." "You didn't think it was worth it to talk to me?" She didn't answer. I shook my head, stood up slowly, and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. My hands felt heavy. Everything felt heavy. "You'd already made your decision, hadn't you?" I said. She just looked at me and said, "I've been thinking about this for a while." "Yeah, I figured." I muttered, more to myself than to her. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't ask where I was going or if I'd be back. She just sat there, back straight, eyes fixed on the wall, as if she were already living in her next chapter. And I walked out. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there for one more second pretending we were still anything like what we used to be. I drove around the city for hours. I didn't stop anywhere. I didn't call anyone. I just looped through back roads and highways. That house wasn't a home anymore, and suddenly, every room felt rented. Every conversation we had there, every night of dumb movies, every argument, every laugh, it all suddenly felt like background noise in someone else's life. When I finally pulled into my parents' driveway, my dad was already outside working on the shed. He looked up, didn't ask a single question, just nodded his head and said, "You staying?" I said, "Yeah." He opened the garage and said, "Then pull the truck in. It's going to rain." That's him. No speeches, just action. Inside, my mom hugged me so tight I thought she was going to break me. She always had a sixth sense for bad news. It didn't matter if it was a failed test or a broken heart. She just knew. She didn't say, "I told you so," even though I know she'd seen this coming from a mile away. She just said, "You're going to be okay." And she started making up the guest room like I hadn't moved out 6 years ago. The next morning, it all hit me, like waking up late for a job you don't have anymore. I went through the motions. I made coffee, checked emails, answered a few questions from a job site, but my mind wasn't connecting. I kept replaying the last few months, trying to see where I went wrong. There was no cheating, no fights, no blow-ups. It was just her slowly pulling away, and I was either too dumb to notice or too hopeful to admit it. I didn't hear from her for a few days after that. Not a text, not an email, nothing, as if the house had swallowed her whole. But I did get a call from her mom, of all people. We were never close. She was always polite, but with that fake, tight smile. You know the type. Compliments your shirt at Christmas, then asks if your job is still physical labor. Always smiling with her teeth, not her eyes. But now she was calling me like we were two adults sorting out a property dispute. I answered because I didn't recognize the number. "Hi, Issen," she started, her voice sickly sweet. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Depends," I said. "What's this about?" She let out a sigh, as if she were the one who was stressed. "I just wanted to talk for a bit. Daniela is having a hard time with all this." I didn't say anything. "She's been very emotional. This wasn't an easy decision, you know," she continued. "She's under a lot of pressure between work and everything going on. She needs space right now." I stayed quiet, just letting her talk. I knew where this was going, and then she dropped it in there gently. "It would be better if you didn't make this process any harder for her than it already is." I let that comment hang in the air for a few seconds. "Are you seriously calling me to tell me that?" I asked. There was a pause, then a light chuckle, as if I was being difficult on purpose. I just thought it would help if we all kept things calm and civilized. Right? I said. Thanks for the call. And I hung up before she could say anything else. I stood there for a second, phone still in my hand. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was a kind of deep exhaustion, a worn-out disbelief. How? Was she really sending her mom to handle me after all this? The worst part wasn't losing the marriage, it was realizing I didn't know who she was anymore. It felt like the person I married had emotionally checked out 6 months ago and just forgot to let me know. And that bonus changed something in her. I'm not saying she turned into a greedy villain overnight, but something shifted. That amount of money made her start picturing a life without me, and instead of talking about it, she just walked off stage and left me holding the script. Eventually, I snapped out of it enough to call my lawyer. I wasn't even thinking about the money at first. I just wanted to know what I was supposed to do. That's when he asked me to send him the prenup. I dug it out of a storage box and emailed him a copy. A couple of hours later, he called me back and said, "You'd better sit down for this." He laid it out for me calmly. That part we signed about marital assets included bonuses. It mentioned them specifically: performance bonuses, incentives, commissions, all clearly marked as shared property unless it was excluded. And there was no exclusion. Daniela had included that clause when we drafted the document together. Neither of us thought it would matter at the time, but now that one line was going to change everything. He explained we could file a motion to preserve my right to the bonus, meaning to stop her from transferring it, hiding it, or making any moves without court approval. He was calm, too calm, like he'd seen this before. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or like things were about to get a lot more complicated. It's ironic. She was the one who insisted on the prenup. She wanted everything clean, to avoid complications. And in her rush to protect herself, she forgot to see the whole picture. $10 million earned during the marriage. Not an inheritance. Not a gift. That, at least in the eyes of the law, was joint property. I didn't tell my parents right away, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I still couldn't process it. All I could think about was how fast she shut the door between us. No goodbye, no fight, just silence and a packet of legal documents. And now she'd have to face the very document she thought would let her walk away clean. It didn't feel like revenge or even justice. It just felt strange, really, like I'd stepped out of one life and stumbled into another, and now I was being told I had a right to something I never asked for. The following days were a whirlwind of paperwork and silent tension. Daniela still wasn't communicating directly, not a text, not an email, nothing. But her parents, oh, they found their voices real quick. I don't know what she told them. Maybe she made it sound like I was coming after her for money, but I suddenly started getting calls and voicemails that sounded like an awkward HR meeting. Then her dad called, and that one wasn't gentle at all. He got straight to the point. He said I was being greedy, that I hadn't contributed to that bonus, and that taking any part of it would be disgusting. He also made some comment about how men like me never know when to walk away, whatever that means. I hung up mid-call. My lawyer told me to save all the voicemails and texts in case we needed to show the tone of everything later. So I did. I was surprised Daniela was letting them speak for her. It was like she wanted to stay behind the curtain while they did the pushing. That hurt more than I expected. We were married for 6 years. You'd think I'd at least get a conversation, not a two-person PR team. I remember my mom listening to one of the voicemails and muttering, "She really thinks you're just going to tuck your tail and disappear." My dad didn't say much, but that night he came into my room with a manila folder full of receipts and bank records. "Start gathering your things," he said. "If they want proof, we'll give them proof." So I did. I spent the next week going through old papers, mortgage payments in my name, utility bills I covered when she was between raises, grocery lists, expenses from trips we took together. I had everything, and I highlighted everything with both our names on it. It wasn't about counting pennies, it was about showing I wasn't just a passenger in this marriage. I contributed, and in many ways, I pulled more than my weight. The hardest part of it all wasn't the paperwork, it was the silence. It's weird how someone can go from sleeping next to you every night to not even acknowledging your existence. No calls, no texts, no explanations, just lawyers as intermediaries and silence filling in the gaps. I started to question the whole timeline. When did she check out? Was she already planning this when she got the bonus? Was it that easy to leave behind? My lawyer filed the motion to freeze the bonus account. It was approved pretty quickly. That must have set off alarms because 2 days later, I got a settlement offer through her lawyer. They wanted to offer me a one-time sum in the spirit of closure. I won't say the number, but it was insulting. Laughably low. Less than what I'd paid into the house since we bought it, and way less than half the bonus. They really thought I was just going to fold. My lawyer asked if I wanted to respond with a counteroffer. I told him I didn't want to go to court. At this point, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about how they were talking to me, like I didn't matter, like I was just something Daniela had to get out of her shoe on the way to being rich and single. And the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me, not with rage, but with a steady resolve that I had to see this through to the end. She finally messaged me after all that. It came via email with the subject line, "Just want to clear the air." A single paragraph, no greeting, no sign-off. Just a block of text trying to sound serene, but feeling like a fancy way to sidestep responsibility. It read, "I know this has become more hostile than either of us wanted, and it was never my intention for this to escalate. I genuinely hope we can both emerge from this process with dignity and respect for what we shared. I don't want this to define how we remember our time together, and I think it's important that we both try to move forward in peace." I didn't respond. Instead, I got more organized. We built a timeline. When the bonus was announced, when it was deposited, when she filed, how quickly everything moved once the money came in. My lawyer said it painted a pretty clear picture. I just nodded and kept going. I wasn't going to stop anymore. I also contacted a forensic accountant. My lawyer suggested it in case we needed to look into how the money had been handled since it hit her account. That really spooked them. Her team started calling more voicemails, more urgency. Her mom even showed up unannounced at my parents' house. My dad answered the door and, from what I heard, told her to get back in her car before he called the sheriff. She left without a word. That's when I started to realize they might not have expected me to fight back. Maybe Daniela thought I'd just take the papers, be embarrassed, and disappear quietly. She didn't count on me having a competent lawyer, parents who had my back, or a version of myself that doesn't fold when people raise their voices. By the time the court date arrived, I was ready, not excited, not hopeful, just ready. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them rewrite our entire marriage just because the numbers turned out to be inconvenient for them. The morning of the hearing felt like waking up on the day of a test you didn't sign up for. I was up before dawn and sat in the kitchen for a while, just staring at my coffee. My mom was already up, frying eggs and pretending she wasn't worried. She didn't say much, just gave me some extra potatoes and asked if I had everything I needed. My dad offered to drive me, but I told him I'd go alone, not for dramatic effect, but because I needed a few minutes to clear my head without anyone watching me. When I got to the courthouse parking lot, her car was there, sleek, silver, spotless as always. I parked 2 rows back and just sat there for a few minutes. I tried not to think about the last time we were in the same room. It had been months. It's strange how someone can go from being your home to just another person sitting on the opposite bench. Inside the courtroom, the air was colder than I expected. Everything echoed. Her team was already there. 2 lawyers and a financial advisor who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Daniela wouldn't look at me. She sat, stiff, flipping through documents like they were lunch menus. Her expression didn't change. I could have been a pizza delivery guy for all the attention she gave me. My lawyer leaned over and said, "We're not here to win a popularity contest. We're here to enforce a contract." That helped. It kept me focused. The judge came in right on time. An older woman, maybe in her late 50s, with a no-nonsense expression. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She said we were going to stick to the facts and the evidence. I respected that. Daniela's lawyer started with a polished, almost rehearsed tone. She stood up, arranged her papers like she was pitching a startup, and said, "Your Honor, this bonus was not an arbitrary windfall. It was the direct result of my client's individual merit. She led a high-performance team, oversaw 2 intercompany mergers, and exceeded her firm's revenue targets by over 40%. She paused as if for effect. The judge didn't react, just nodded for her to continue. This compensation, she went on, reflects the culmination of years of effort. It is not something that was planned for or built jointly within the marriage. My client's role was unique and independently earned. We believe it should not be considered shared marital property." I didn't flinch, just sat there listening, hands clasped in my lap. I wasn't going to argue that she didn't work hard. She did, but working hard doesn't override the words you signed. That bonus came in while we were still married, and the prenup spelled it out. Then her lawyer changed direction. "We also believe this case is being emotionally driven," she added. Given the state of the relationship at the time, the marriage had been slowly dissolving. They had grown apart. The bonus, while large, arrived during a period where both parties were no longer aligned in their goals. It was a coincidence of timing, not a cause and effect relationship. That's when I glanced at my lawyer. He didn't blink, didn't interrupt, just kept taking notes like they were digging the hole themselves. I could feel the narrative they were trying to build, like we were two distant planets that just drifted too far apart, and her $10 million check just happened to fall out of the sky mid-breakup. Then it was our turn. My lawyer started slowly, walking the judge through the prenuptial agreement. He read, word for word, the clause about income earned during the marriage, specifying that it was shared unless excluded. Then he showed that it wasn't excluded. It just sat there, waiting to become relevant. He presented the timeline. The bonus was deposited 3 weeks before she filed. No fights, no arguments, no warnings. Just a bonus, then a divorce petition. He showed all the documentation, shared bills, my mortgage payments, joint bank statements, and text messages from her acknowledging our shared budget. When they called me to the stand, I just told the truth. I said I wasn't trying to take anything that wasn't mine, that when we signed that document, I didn't expect a dime, and I never wanted to fight over money. But if she was going to walk away and pretend I didn't exist the second she hit the lottery, then I wasn't going to sit there and smile. I kept it short, no venting, no pleading, just facts. Daniela went after me. Her voice didn't waver once. She said she regretted how things ended and that she always intended to handle it with respect. Then she mentioned something about financial independence and how she felt the bonus was a result of her personal growth, not the marriage. The judge asked her one simple question. Did you both sign this agreement willingly? She said yes. Did you read this clause before you signed? She nodded again. That was it. The judge said we would reconvene in 2 weeks for the final ruling. She wanted time to review everything carefully. Walking out of that building was surreal. I passed Daniela in the hallway. She didn't stop. She didn't even flinch. She just walked right past me like I wasn't there. I guess that was her version of closure. Cold, clean, wordless. That night, my parents asked how it went. I told them everything, and they were both quiet for a moment. My mom said, "It doesn't matter what she thinks the bonus means. What matters is what she signed." My dad grunted in agreement, which for him is like shouting. Over the next few days, I went back to work like nothing happened, but underneath it all, I was waiting, thinking not about the money, but about how someone you loved could just walk away and act like you were never part of their success. I don't think Daniela expected me to fight. I think she thought I'd be embarrassed, too proud. Or maybe she thought I'd be the bigger person and let her keep it all. That was the phrase her mother used in one of her voicemails, let her have this moment. As if I were stealing a birthday candle and not half a life we built together. At some point, I wondered if I was being petty, but every time that doubt crept in, I remembered the way she looked at me when she handed me those papers, like I was a task crossed off. Not a person, not a partner, just another box on her list. That's when I knew I wasn't backing down. Once the judge gave her verdict, everything that came after felt flat. I don't mean that in a bad way, just quiet. There were no more threats, no late-night messages, no emails from lawyers trying to twist things. It was like someone had finally turned off the constant buzzing that had been running in the background of my life for months. The paperwork took a couple of weeks to finalize, but we already knew the outcome. Daniela signed the final documents through her lawyer. I signed mine in a quiet conference room with my lawyer and a witness. When I walked out of that office, it was all over. The day the settlement hit my account, I didn't rush to check it. In fact, I left my phone on the kitchen counter for most of the morning while I was working on a bathroom across town. It was a basic remodel, nothing fancy. When I got home and saw the confirmation email, I just sat down at the table, let out a long breath, and stared at the screen for a while. It was a large sum, bigger than anything I'd ever had to my name before. But it didn't feel like a prize, it felt like a reimbursement, not just for the financial side of the marriage, but for the way I'd been dismissed, the way everyone talked about me. Like I was a temporary employee hired to mow the lawn and pay the bills while she climbed the corporate ladder. I didn't squander the money. I had no interest in spite spending or showing off. I paid off the few debts I had. I set some aside for taxes, and then I sat down and thought hard about what I really wanted. I ended up investing some of it back into my plumbing business. I bought new tools, upgraded the truck, gave one of the guys on my crew a raise he'd earned 3 times over. The rest of it, I just put away. Safe, boring, no risks. I figured if life had already thrown one fire at me, I wasn't going to walk right into another one just to see what happened. I also started looking for a new place, not a huge house, just something that felt like mine. I found a small two-bedroom in a nearby town, closer to several of our regular clients, with no memories attached to it, and that was precisely the point. I heard nothing from Daniela after the settlement. I assumed we were done, and I was fine with that. Over time, word trickled back to me through a mutual friend. She was still at the same company, but things weren't going great. Apparently, people started asking questions, not just about the bonus, but about how fast everything fell apart afterward. Someone said she'd told them we were basically separated when the money came in, like it had nothing to do with what happened next, which, for the record, wasn't even close to the truth. But I didn't correct her. Let her tell whatever version helps her sleep. I was done keeping evidence. Until she showed up. I just hauled a new water heater into the garage of my new house when I saw a familiar car driving slowly down the street and pull into the driveway like it had every right to be there. She got out, sunglasses in her hand, hair pulled back, dressed down on purpose. No wave, no, is this a bad time? She just said, I see you're all settled in. I just stood there, holding the hand truck with sweat still on my neck, trying to process what was happening. She looked around the front yard and said, I know this seems weird, but I know where you live. Then she let out an awkward laugh, like that was charming. It wasn't. I didn't say anything, just waited for her to get to the point. She took a step toward me and said, I think we rushed things. That was her opening line. She started talking fast, like she'd rehearsed it. She said the divorce moved too quickly, that she didn't handle it well, that she was overwhelmed, under pressure, and made decisions without thinking about the cost. She mentioned how cold she was, how she never gave me a real conversation. She knew that. Then she said something about how maybe we could talk and see where we are now, like it was some kind of olive branch. I let her finish, and then I told her straight up, showing up unannounced at my new house and leading with, I know where you live, was not the best introduction. I wasn't angry, just no longer interested. She looked surprised, like she expected me to drop everything and rewind, but that door was already closed. She didn't just end the marriage, she erased me from it the second that bonus hit her account. And you don't get to pretend it was all a mix-up just because your job is starting to ask uncomfortable questions. I told her I hoped she found clarity, but I wasn't interested in starting over. Not after how things ended. She didn't argue, just gave a small nod and backed away slowly. She said, I had to try. Then she got in her car and drove away. That was the last time I ever saw her. And honestly, it felt like the real ending. Quiet, awkward, and a little weird, just like how our marriage ended. Only this time, I was the one standing on solid ground. Her parents never contacted me again. Not that I expected a follow-up. They probably saw the ruling, shook their heads, and convinced themselves the judge made a mistake. People like that don't usually self-reflect. They just rewrite history to cast themselves as the victims. And that's fine, they can have it. My parents were relieved when it was all settled. My mom finally stopped jumping every time the house phone rang, and my dad stopped keeping his folder of important documents open on the dining room table, like he was getting ready for round 2. I think they were proud of how I handled it, even if they didn't say it directly. My dad did slip me a folded note one morning that said, when they underestimate you, they give you an advantage. That was it. Classic him. Life is different now, but not worse. Just more my own. I have a routine again. I get up early, go to jobs, check on the crew, come home, cook for myself, sleep better. It's not exciting, it's not glamorous, but it's peaceful. And after all this, that's worth more than any settlement. Sometimes people ask if I consider getting married again, and I usually say, maybe, if the person is right and the paperwork is fair. It gets a laugh, but I mean it. I'm not bitter. I still believe in love. I just don't believe in ignoring red flags or pretending that silence is the same thing as peace. I didn't come out of this looking for revenge. I came out of it looking for clarity. Daniela thought the prenup would protect her from me. What she didn't realize is that it also protected me from being left with nothing, from being forgotten, from being told in legal terms that I didn't matter. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.